stories about water and urban places. This is Ideanthro. Hey everyone, and welcome back to Ideanthro. And welcome back to another episode of Front of Mind, where we nab ourselves a guest from this broader water industry and pick their brains about what's been interesting them, fascinating them, running around in their head recently. Our guest today is Piet Filet. Now, when I reached out to Piet, and this should be a bit of a giveaway of this conversation. When I reached out to Piet, I was like, "Look, Piet, what's on the front of your mind?" And you're like, "Engagement." And this makes sense, because even though your background is in science, like ag science and a bit of local government and the like, most recently your work is all about collaboration. You refer to yourself as a collaboration broker. So engagement should not be a surprise here. Would you like to kick us off? Why did engagement pop to the front of your mind when I said, look, what's on your mind in this water world of ours at the moment? Why engagement?
Jack, for me, the knowledge and the experiences that are out in our profession are quite rich, and over the last 4 years I've stumbled into a role where I've been trying to somehow harvest, share and put people in contact with each other. So engagement's sort of become my bread and butter.
Okay. Why don't you give people a little bit of context, just briefly, of what that role is, so they've got a bit of background to that?
Sure, Jack. Like, it all comes from back in 2011 with the floods that we had here in southeast Queensland. And many of us in our different professional roles at the time, I think, looking back, sort of would have stood there and went, wow, that was a huge impact. How did that all come about? If we ever had a flood like this again, what would we do differently? Post those floods, I got involved with a group of professionals who basically were interested to better understand what they could do better in a future scenario where a flood could present itself in Brisbane. And the bottom line is that we do know we will have more floods here in Brisbane. And that little collective of professionals, it was a very bottom-up approach. Like, interesting, what happened is that post the floods there was a small delegation of Dutch water specialists who came and basically in a very open and generous way said, look, what is it that we could do to help? Is there some knowledge and experience that we could share? And a few of us embraced that concept, and essentially by 2013, 2014 we'd formed enough people who were meeting on a regular enough basis to sort of build a nice program of engagement on flood risk management.
So why was engagement important in that context? Because so I get, we have an issue. There has been a flood, it is a hot topic, and we recognise there'll be more floods. So I get the importance from that point of view. Why is engagement the response, or a part of the response?
It's, to me, and looking, I think everyone's going to have their own sort of definition or thoughts around engagement.
I was just wondering if we should define that word, actually.
Look, it means different things to different people. Often we hear the word community engagement, consultation, which is all part of a, sort of an informing and awareness building and maybe a two-way. But to me, the engagement here is really about, in a professional collective or in a professional setting, how do you actually reach out and invite people to come and share their knowledge and their experiences? And I suppose the way you might want to design that, I think, is a legitimate engagement activity.
Okay. So that's the definition of it. Why then is that important to do?
I think a lot of things that happened post 2011, we had the Flood Commission of Inquiry, there was all sorts of little statutory issues that were visited and sort of important, I think, housekeeping issues to do. But I could sense that there was a real hunger and gap in those sort of 2013, 14, 15 years with people going, what is it that we need to do? We've all got little bits of skills to add to sort of the future sort of resilience preparing plan. But there was a real sense from a range of professionals, which is also part of this issue. There's a diversity of interest around floods because no one profession or one entity has this responsibility. So that's why this engagement process actually evolved into a process. Let's find architects, let's find the engineers, let's find the catchment managers, the water supply people, the sociologists, the economists, which is what sort of formed in our group. And how do we sort of share those insights? And that's what the little program that I've developed over the years has tried to do.
You know something I like about that? So you mentioned like quite a diversity of different professional groups there. Something that I've been exploring over the past month or two, mainly just from the books that I've happened to read recently.
Yeah.
This hasn't necessarily been a specific approach, but it's about how society evolves and changes and how bad we as humans are at predicting the future. Typically because what we do to predict the future is we look at the recent past and extrapolate it with minor variations. There's a few like really classic examples of how poor you are. Like a classic example of this is if before Henry Ford popularised the motor car, if you'd asked people what they wanted, they'd have said more powerful horses. And so I've been ruminating on this and going, okay, if we're trying to, so I come from like a water quality world, and there's some real improvements in the cost efficiency and the breadth of which we can treat water. If we're trying to create an environment for which that can occur, trying to just like do it from a really hard and fast mandated approach doesn't seem like a particularly good way to do it from the view of, well, if I can't predict the future accurately, how do I just go and force it through? But on the other hand, engagement and bringing together multiple different types of professionals seems like a way to create the environment for that to happen without you needing to have any idea whatsoever what the actual answer looks like.
Look, and you're dead right, because I think this is a pathway approach, which if you talk to some of the people, this is what adaptation is all about, because I think the future scenarios that we can put up are many and varied, and they've all got some sort of legitimacy. But what can you do to actually be on a trajectory that can allow you to better deal with some of those scenarios rather than a business as usual case? Because one of the activities we did back in 2016, we actually did a hypothetical that we sort of try to imagine Brisbane having a flood in another 20 years' time and how well we might have dealt with it. So that was a really interesting engagement activity. Like, it was a bit of work to bring together all this diverse opinion, but it provided a bit of a foundation on what some of the thinking might be. But we looked at its ramifications. What's it mean for the community and their safety? What's it mean for the environment? What's it mean for business continuity? And what's it mean for infrastructure? So those four things already, like they're domains of work in their own right, yet a future flood or flood event all triggers concern and a need for preparedness for those areas. So that's why I find the diversity of views is vital. But that was an interesting exercise, because I think we struggle to really imagine what another 20 years might be like.
Yep.
Which is it's not trivial, but I think this sense of, okay, what are some of the steps we need to do to get on the front foot? And honestly, some of this engagement in professional circles is actually part of the initial step. Because if you're not sort of at least at a professional level trying to go, folks, we need to be a bit better prepared, then that's critical, let alone having the conversation with the community, and that's a whole nother domain. But I think professionally, that sort of activity, I think, was the hallmark of starting to do some deeper work. Prior to that, we've often had lots of very, I think, engaging seminars. Quite interestingly enough, we always made sure we did it somewhere that was at no one's workplace. We actually used my wife's sort of travel business where she was at the time, which was sort of quite illuminating, lots of interesting pictures. We network before and we network after in terms of a bit of hospitality. People literally spend a lot of time after and before the presentation sort of just comparing and sharing notes. And
that strikes me, like these days when I go to conferences, I don't go for the presentation. I'll present something of mine if I think it's interesting, but I don't go for other people's presentations. That's a bonus. I go to run into people and to form networks, which it's essentially like, it's like there's too much stuff in the world to possibly learn it all. But if you know who to ask, then when you're facing that problem, you can go and solve it without having to
And look, and I think this is exactly what the pathway process of adaptation is about. Like, when you start to sort of go, okay, we do want to do things a little bit differently, who do you need to be part of your team? Because that's essentially, if I look within local government, some of the really robust sort of approaches have been quite diverse teams. Sure, there's often been a bit of a technical element, some of the modelling and some of the engineering, think hydrology, but I think now we're starting to see other areas where it is a little bit different. It's looking at that broader, what's it really mean for the community? Like, I remember Andrew Chesterman, when he was working at Brisbane City Council, he kept on saying, can you explain what this might all mean in terms of livability? And that to me has often been a really refreshing perspective, because a lot of this adaptation, whether it's for floods, heat, extreme events, it's sort of got to still play out in terms of how we live our daily lives.
Yep.
And that to me has sort of been a really nice measure of the types of solutions we want. And can we be clever enough to enhance our livability in such a way that we also provide these sort of protective measures or adaptive? And so that's been quite a nice, refreshing opening for some of the more recent work we've done.
Yeah, gotcha. Now, something I'm curious to know. So, there's a group that is engaged through this flood community practice, and I'm sure it's a case of people will, drop in more regularly and then come back out and waxing and waning and the like. What's the mix of age groups and experiences been? Because one of the reasons why I started Ideanthro was that I recognised that really early in my career, I was very fortunate. I fell into this position as a student at Logan City Council, working on a topic that happened to be a fairly hot topic at Healthy Waterways at the time.
Okay.
And there was good engagement between my boss DJ and Alan Hoban, who was at Healthy Waterways at the time. There's good connections there. So I got to meet people like Alan, who smart, interesting, pushing the limits there. Therefore, got to meet other people in this field, and I recognised that in fact, very few young professionals who come into that space get that opportunity early on. It's far more likely to end up in a small consulting firm doing nothing.
Sure.
Long story short, one of the reasons I started doing this was to try and get more guests on, so that people can get even a de facto interaction with people. What's the mix of people coming along to the community to practice?
Look, it's one of the characteristics of people who are very open and willing to share. And it's no surprise, we actually have attracted quite a few young professionals over time. And in fact, I've got a small core group who are coming all the time.
Okay.
Got a strong link with the International Water Centre, so some of their master's students doing the integrated water management masters, they come along, and so they bring different nationality perspectives as well. But I have been trying to reach out and find sort of early career academic or early career professionals to come and join us. So and that remains the case. And in many cases, I've been saying to the ones that come, look, if you've got some other friends who would like to, and that's what's been happening. They've been bringing others along.
Yeah.
So look, it is quite diverse in the ages that we have and the level of experience. Even sort of people in their mid-career, but it's people. I think what I find with making it an engaging setting, because we really try, we have usually a couple of guest speakers to stimulate the discussion, but the process of the day is offering the questions and group activity. So it is all about creating sort of interactive settings. So as opposed to more the traditional seminars where it's sort of a bit talk and a passive response, I really try and give the opportunity for that questioning, and I think that brings along a different type of personality. People who are willing, there's a famous expression, you don't know what you don't know.
Yes. And
I try and exploit that and provide opportunities for people to sort of see what might be the answers. And I think I'm really impressed, a lot of young emerging professionals are hungry for that. So, and I've got some great, more experienced colleagues in the group who are more than willing to share.
It's funny that you mentioned the don't know what you don't know thing, because as you were explaining some of that context just then, one of the things I wanted to highlight was I feel that sometimes, whether it's going to a conference or anything else, that the benefit is often not immediate. So you have to, it's an investment is the best analogy for this, in that you are putting in time up front. to get a return at some point in the future, but you don't quite know when that's going to be, and you probably don't know exactly what form it's going to take. So it is one of those things where it's like you've got to, and in this respect, it's no different to like training for sport. Like I come from a bike riding background. You train for ages and ages and ages to hopefully get a return at national champs once a year or something like that. But yeah, sometimes I think it's one of these things. It's a case of you almost got to trust in the process and just go, okay, put myself out there in a space where good and interesting things can happen, but don't expect them to happen right off the bat. They might, but
look, and a lot of this is about being reasonably humble about your approach to things, and I think good engagement, good networks is an opportunity sometimes to go along and just be part of a listening crowd, and all of a sudden you will hear someone that goes, wow, that's something I never was appreciative or didn't aware. Like by way of an example, our very first speaker in our network was James Davidson, an architect. Now James has since then met a whole range of people in other areas. I've worked very closely with him on the Water Futures book, which is proving to be a huge sort of door opener on fresh thinking. But here we got this architect who, and a lot of us find James, he's very engaging, he's really interesting, he's very left field, but that's just proved to be a very fruitful an association. And he's one of us, quite a few that different people have met and gone on to sort of form new collaborations, done project work together, done training together. I think that's why engagement is important. You actually have to make time. You're right, it's an investment. A lot of people in the workplace these days, we have a lot of deadlines, and there's this sort of perception that you've got to be focused doing your project work, as opposed to an era when I grew up as a young professional was, because in the beginning I was a research scientist, you actually had to spend time reading journal papers. I remember Fridays for 2 hours, that was the start of the day. I would do that. But I set aside time to learn and understand what was happening in other parts of the world.
It's funny that you say that, because I have a very long list of journal articles to read that I never ever get through, because of the exponential fact that you read one journal and you get 5 references and it blows out from there. But it's funny that you mentioned that. So we talked a lot about flood community practice. Are there other, and I haven't pre-warned you with this question, so are there other types or engagement initiatives that you've seen going on that you particularly like? Like, it doesn't have to be an SEQ, doesn't have to, but just to give people, in case they're going, coming to the community practice isn't my thing, but maybe this might appeal, or...
Like, in recent times, I was really impressed. My oldest daughter, Monique, got involved with, the Youth Coalition for Climate Change. And they were very much, and they're still around, might not have the right name, but they spend a lot of time learning on how to develop good arguments and get into advocacy and try and get people a bit more positively thinking around adaptation and challenging some of the climate change threats. So you get that happening within young people. Other sort of engaging issues, the professional societies are all there and they continue to do lots of interesting things, but it sort of sits within that one domain. And I'm trying to think of some of the other groups I go to, and I'm struggling.
That's
because,
okay. I told people when I started this question, I hadn't pre-warned you, I put you on the spot. So that's okay. Why don't I jump in and throw, so one thing that and this is something that I've been involved with, although I didn't start it recently, past couple of years to be honest, is a group, myself and a few other young-ish water professionals, emphasis on the ish, started getting together about 2 years ago, getting together every 6 weeks or so for drinks after work, just to broadly talk about broadly work related, but it's not like, oh, I've got this issue at work, I'm solving this problem sort of thing, but it's more that, to talk about stuff. But one thing we started doing really early on with that, and to date no one has said no to this, is we just started hitting up people who we thought would be interesting to meet, and asking if they'd come along as a guest. And as far as, I'm not sure if he still holds this position, but at the time, Jeff Garrett was the chief scientist of Queensland. he came along.
Yeah.
That was because one of our members, Solveig, went to a presentation he gave and then accosted him afterwards.
Good.
But the point was, that was very much a networking and engaging sort of activity, but it was also just some kind of friends meeting to have a chat.
And look, and that's the setting by which this can work, and I think that's why I've been very encouraged, because it's been a bit of a chicken and egg process coming out of this sort of core group of people who really were keen to get on the front foot around floods. Our issue now no longer is really about floods. Floods are cut-crossing issue. It's more about the broader land management, water management, catchment. Is it an urban centre? Is it a regional setting? So it's quite diverse in that sense. But along the way, some of the comfort amongst the people sharing has, really developed, some nice, healthy professional friendships. People actually look forward to coming. I know some of the people who come have really busy schedules, but when there's an event on, they're willing to make that time. So that's sort of been a really encouraging measure of success. And we've had a lot of support from Suncorp, the insurance group, because this is part of sort of one of the feedback loops and all of our sort of adaptive measures. But Josh Cooney there's been a great colleague to sort of bring that sort of industry along, and even in the consulting groups there's people who are really at the cutting edge of having to get into some of the designs to influence councils, and how broadly thinking can that be. So I think, and then like I mentioned before, we did this book Water Futures, which I'm always happy to promote. But Water Futures, now this was an investment by a core group of people, both in their time and some of their funds, to bring this together. But out of that group, we continue now to be in regular contact. Some people are doing other projects together. We've got an advice sort of network. If someone's really struggling with something, you can quickly sort of shoot them an email or pick up the phone. Well, in fact, the steering committee for the Flood Community of Practice we have some of the most sort of unusual but deep and enlightening conversations when we're trying to plan out some of our events, because we go always off topic, but we explore things. And a lot of it's a friendship, but good friendship then opens up respect. People are willing to listen, people are willing to challenge in a constructive way, and that's how you build fresh ideas. And that to me is the core of why engagement, if you sort of build a bit of plan into it, make a bit of a roadmap, you can generate some of these fresh and interesting ideas. And it's hard for some organisations who've got lots of other things they're having to deal with to be like that. But I think like our little group now is sort of a little bit of an independent think tank, where we're trying to put things up that are options for people to consider. And that's that. But again, it's that process of bringing people together so that they leave their sort of organisational issues at the door, their egos at the door, but then they pool all of their sort of knowledge and experience, and that's when you get this sort of more catalytic, or you really it's 2 + 2 gives you 20, not 4.
Yeah, which ties in beautifully, like in my context, for the whole, you don't know what the future is and you're not good at predicting it, but make the environment, and then the future will sort itself out in a very nice way.
Totally.
Okay, I think that brings us to a neat little spot to conclude. Is there anything from your point of view that we've missed that we should have touched off on, or?
I think no, we've covered that time.
Okay, well let's wrap it up there. Let's go and we will wrap this up, and we can stop looking longingly at the seat behind us that's in the shade, or behind the camera that's in the shade, but we'll leave it there. So Pete, thank you for joining us.
Pleasure.
As always, thank you for tuning in. Actually, where can people find you? If people want to find you, either you or the community of practice.
Look, it's we've got our website, floodcop.com.au. There's a newsletter contact on there. Join us, because literally in March, April this year, we'll start our events together. I've got a few partners who are backing the collective this year, so the network will definitely back in activity.
Cool.
And open to anyone to come and join us.
Okay,
thanks, Jack.
I love it. No worries. Thank you, Pete. Thank you for tuning in. We'll see you next time. Before you go, our best episodes come from your questions. This knowledge base, these discussions that are Ideanthro, improve with your contribution. So if there's a topic, an idea, a concept that you would like us to explore, come and ask us. You know where to find us. www.ideanthro.com/contact. You can find us on Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, and that place you get your good podcasts from. You know where to find us. We look forward to hearing from you. We'll see you soon.